What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Roundtable Pros and Podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, this Friday is not going to be a usual Friday. Like we talk about SmackDown and AEW. We're not going to do that this week. We're going to talk about the Vince McMahon documentary.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
I'm just going to shoot straight from the hip right now. The opening scene with Vince in the ring, promising, we're going to get like an exclusive dive into his decisions in wrestling. It just turned into a regular fucking documentary.
That's what it was, mainly.
I didn't learn anything new about Vince
because we already knew everything.
And it's Vince is like a singular-minded, power-hungry capitalist, man.
Innocent pal.
Dude's been in the wrestling game for 5 decades. Literally, I'm 50 years old. That dude has been in wrestling longer, like as long as I've been alive. That's crazy.
Longer even.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm not a day over 50 though. But anyway,
what is he? 78 this year, I think.
Yeah.
So that means he's technically been in wrestling since he was like 13, 14 years old, according to the documentary.
Crazy.
Yeah. There are a lot of things that they talked about in the documentary, though. Like,
actually, there was some things I didn't really know about, but you guys probably already knew. And
like them breaking away from the NWA.
Yeah.
Like that was great. Hogan busting up the union organization deal that Jesse the Body was trying to put together.
Here's my biggest issue with this documentary, and I just want to see my firm fluffy pussy.
Oh, look at that pussy
right now.
A little hairy. You might want to take care of that.
It is. I should shave it. It's purring though, so that's a good sign. He looks so pissed off that I'm even touching him. But my biggest problem with this documentary, I feel like it could have been a lot more than 6 episodes. I feel like they very much glossed over a lot of those early years. Because, I mean, honestly, like, WCW got about as much attention as Vince buying the company did in the documentary.
Yeah.
Very weird. And, like, it is.
Yeah, there was a portion that was like the Who Killed WCW portion of the documentary, which this had nothing to do with WCW.
And also,
it's a Vince documentary.
And also the whole Hulk Hogan thing. I'm like, the fuck, when did this hear about the Hulk Hogan?
So, and my other big issue with the documentary was it very much ignored like all of Vince's failures outside of wrestling. Like it built him up as like, oh, he's a super genius and this, he's saved professional. Like it did not. He's such a great businessman. It didn't cover any of his failures outside the World Bodybuilding Federation, ICO Pro. They
XFL.
barely covered the XFL.
I mean, they covered XFL a little bit, but
they only covered the first run of the XFL.
Yeah, it's just the first run.
Cover the second run. They didn't cover like his failed hockey team that he had in Cape Cod when he bought the arena. They didn't cover any of that stuff. And it's like there's so much more they could.
I feel like there's gonna be another part of that.
There's not. I think that's it.
How
can they do another part? Vince definitely ain't gonna sit down.
They can definitely do a part without Vince being there.
I mean, but how? Like, you can't really tell the story without. I mean, if you do the documentary about Vince without Vince, you're just releasing the same documentary that 100 other people have already made. I mean, Dark Side of the Ring's done a whole.
It was personally a Dark Side of the Ring, but movie wise.
It was more in depth than that because I mean you had Vince there, but like there was so much that they didn't cover with Vince, and I feel like personally like they very much humanized Vince in this documentary. A lot of people said that I didn't feel like it was an attack. I feel like very much like Vince releasing that statement the day before the documentary came out. Vince knew what he was doing. First of all, Vince is smart.
Yeah.
He knows how to do PR. He knows how to get attention, all that. And Vince, by releasing that statement, if Vince really hated the documentary that much,
he wouldn't have appeared.
No, it's not he wouldn't have appeared because the narrative is that he got pissed with it after he left because of the lawsuit and whatever. If Vince really hated the documentary that much, he wouldn't have said anything about it.
Yeah.
The fact that Vince released a statement the day before was Vince's way of getting people to watch that documentary. And that's why when people say, oh, Vince is out, I don't believe it. I very much still think Vince is part of WWE.
Yeah, I know he's still part of WWE.
I don't believe
maybe
there's people, very loyal people, that he has handpicked for positions that were also in that documentary.
Yeah,
that I'm going to get into, certain aspects about what I didn't like about it. That still are, to this day, to this very SmackDown that just happened, still behind the scenes running the show.
Yeah, I mean, Cody Rhodes brought him out to the ring when he won the title.
Not just him, but the second in charge there too, Mr. Bruce.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. No, yeah, Cody brought Bruce out to the ring.
Hold on. Before we get too into all of this, let's talk about a few things chronologically, okay? They broke away from NWA in 1982.
They really didn't talk much about that, which
that's why I want to talk about it, because
that's why I hate they glossed over so much. Like, it's like they wanted to skip the whole 80s and get right into the steroids.
They wanted to get right into the steroid trial. They wanted to get into the unfair labor practice gimmick that Vince McMahon, that Jesse the Body wanted to do, that Vince was like against, because Hogan, being the piece of shit that he is, snitched out the situation. Independent contractors. So basically the unfair labor practice involved the lack of health care, branding wrestlers as independent contractors for tax purposes. So basically Vince is getting paid taxes on all the WWE guys, independent contractors, and then making them pay for their own flights, their own hotels, and giving them a stipend at the end of the month. It sucks ass. But the one thing about there were two things that that I want to touch on before you get
to that. I just want to talk about the independent contractor thing right quick before we move on from that. I hate it. I think that they are not independent contractors. If you tell that person where they can and cannot work, where they have to be, where they cannot go, that's not an independent contractor.
That's an employee.
That's an employee. If you can put these restrictions on someone, an independent contractor means I come to work for you for a certain amount of time, but I can do other jobs as long as it doesn't.
You can do other things here and there. Yeah.
So, but in saying that, everyone that signs a contract with WWE knows what they're signing. It's the same thing with this whole Ray Phoenix stuff going on with AEW right now. You know what you're signing when you sign it.
Well, that whole Ray Phoenix thing, that's because he was injured. And any smart
I didn't even know he was injured.
What, you got injured twice. Any smart contract negotiator will let you know. You get hurt, that time that you're hurt, your contract stops. So they pay you for a specific duty. You can't provide that duty, your contract stops until you can provide that duty again. So he wasn't wrestling for 6 months? Now he's got 6 months added on to his contract.
I think it's
WWE does the same thing. AEW is doing it. So people complain about AEW doing it, but you can't complain because Vince did the same fucking shit.
Well, here's my thing, and I think that's why people are complaining, because Vince did do the same shit.
Yeah, that's why.
So but regardless of that, that's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, you sign that contract, you agree to whatever's in that contract. Mm-hmm. You can bitch about being labeled an independent contractor. No one held a gun to your head to say you had to sign that contract labeling.
True statement.
You could have chosen not to take the position. Yep. With the Ray Phoenix thing, no one held a gun to your head and said, hey, you have to sign this contract that says if you get injured, that time doesn't count until you're healthy again. Like
that really
know all this stuff when you sign the contract. Why shouldn't it? Why? So if I'm paying you, why should I have to pay? Like, if you agree to work for me for a year, 6 months of that year, you can work for me. Why should you not have to still
you're obligated for that 6
Yeah.
months that you were out.
Why shouldn't you have to do that 6 months that you agreed to?
I mean, that's just good business. So
Yeah.
say what you will about Tony Khan, say what you will about Vince McMahon, but in that aspect, they were good businessmen.
Is someone flushing a toilet?
It sure
Not
sounds
me.
like it, doesn't it?
Flushing a toilet.
What is that noise?
I was hearing a little fan noise. I don't know
Oh,
if
but-
that's.
No, I hear it sounds like a dump truck or
Yeah, but
something.
anyway,
Not for me.
so breaking away
Wait,
from
wait. Hold on. I'm gonna mute myself. It might be me. Wait.
It
Oh,
was
it
you.
is.
Yeah, it was true.
You hear it again?
Myself, but-
Yep.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hear
I
it.
do.
Oh, it's my air conditioner that kicked on. That's weird.
I was
Oh,
like, that
oh,
demon?
okay.
God damn.
It sounded like a toilet at first. I don't know why.
No,
I
it
was like,
sounded
is
like
someone
a demon.
shitting
That's
on
what
the
it sounded like.
podcast?
Let me turn it off.
So while he's doing that, I want to talk about a few things that stood out for me, and then I'll let you guys chime in on the things that stood out for you. But for me, one was the fact that when they broke away from the NWA in 1982, and dismantling all his competition by breaking agreements, like he was breaking contract agreements left and right,
Yeah, it
destroying
was.
companies in his wake. You know, I mean, some say he was a good businessman. Some
That's not a
say he
good
was
businessman.
some say he was a tycoon. Some say he was a tyrant. Whatever. But the things that stood out for me, and I got really pissed off when I sat and watched this part, how he casually justified Owen Hart's dying.
Right.
He
No, that
casually,
really
Oh.
pissed me
he was
off.
just like, yeah, it was, you know, it was a
Yeah, you know, he died.
it
Whatever.
was a
Yeah.
manufacturing defect. You know,
That really
basically,
pissed me off.
just basically, you told Owen Hart, put the fucking thing on.
He did.
They said Owen weighs 220 pounds. The harness is for a 175-pound person. He said, I don't give a fuck. Put the harness on. You're gonna
So-
fucking do it. So for me, and this is just me as a person that does not reflect that of Roundtable Person podcast or Gorilla Press Apparel or any of the gentlemen on this podcast, Vince McMahon killed Owen Hart.
He did.
That's how I
And
feel.
the people think know that he's innocent from that are just making excuses for him.
That's how I feel. And the second thing,
Yeah.
dude, the WWE back in the day, I mean, I don't know what it is now. I haven't asked any of my friends that work there, but the fucking 200 day per year WWE schedule,
Oh my God.
it's fucking crazy. I
Yeah.
remember when Rey Mysterio got married, he literally was wrestling in Dallas, Texas, flew
Got
home
married
to
there.
San Diego, got married that morning, flew back to Monday Night Raw that night, didn't go
Man,
on a honeymoon for fucking 6 months. That's
That's
crazy.
Here's
Yeah.
the thing, though. Going back to what I said earlier, when you sign that contract, you know what you're signing.
Yeah, but that's like working a man to death,
you-
though. That's
But
crazy.
you know what? When you sign that contract, you agree to X amount of dates. You
Yeah.
agree to work a certain amount of dates per year. You know what you're signing up for.
I mean, and, you know, you can argue that. We can argue that all night long, and you're right. Once you
Yeah.
sign that piece of paper, basically you become a slave to Vince McMahon and his rules.
Gotta
So
make it
people were
big.
complaining about the rules. People were like, "Oh,
Right.
well, Vince McMahon this, Vince McMahon that." You know, they talked about the steroid charges, like the steroid charges and the fucking painkillers that allow guys to wrestle every night. Like, I'm gonna say this right now,
Fuck it.
as a professional wrestler, Sinner, you're the only other professional wrestler on this podcast right now, so you can attest to this. We live in constant pain. Like, we're in constant pain all the time. Some of us take painkillers like people will take Skittles. Some of us don't take painkillers. I'm one of the ones that you literally have to force me to take ibuprofen. I live with the pain, you know, and the reason why I live with the pain and I won't subject myself to furthering like to dealing with that the way that they did in the 80s and 90s, because I grew up with the guys in the 80s and 90s. Like, I watched Dr. Jerry Graham take a handful of Vicodin and throw him down his throat and take a fucking shot of whiskey. Like, I watched shit like that. Like, I swore I would never be that guy.
So, and just a touch point on that, and that's one of the things I hate with the addiction in pro wrestling, And I don't think it's right, but Vince gets blamed for a lot of that. At the end of the day, it comes down to personal choice.
Yeah.
I battled my issues with muscle relaxers and painkillers and all that. At the end of the day, I chose to take them so I could make the next show. Like that was a personal choice I made. And I also made the personal choice so as well to get clean. Like at the end of the day, it all comes down to personal choice. I mean, you can say, well, Vince told me I needed to be bigger if I wanted to be a star. You chose to take steroids to get bigger to try to become a star. Vince told you, yeah, you need to become bigger to become a star. You made that choice to put, no one is putting and that's my whole thing. I feel like, now, and I'm not defending Vince. I'm not defending any of that. As much as it may sound like I am, at the end of the day, it all comes down to personal choice. We all do things. Maybe we don't want to, but it's required for us to provide for our family.
Yeah.
I've had jobs where I've worked 80 hours a week, not because I wanted to, working myself to death, but because I had to provide for my family. And that's a choice I made. I made that sacrifice, whether it be to my mental health, my physical health, whatever. Those are choices I made. And at the end of the day, it's so easy to blame the person in charge, the person that's running things, but you also have to take personal responsibility. I've worked with people like Just Incredible, who is, I will say it, the worst addict I've ever worked with in my fucking life. But at the end of the day, he can't blame anyone but himself because he allows himself. No, and you know what? And he is someone, in the time I was working with him, I personally reached out to WWE and got him into rehab. He refused to get on the plane and go. At that point, you cannot blame WWE for your problems or your addictions because you made the choice not to take the help that they offered. And that's the biggest thing. At the end of the day, it's all about personal choice. You have to take accountability for what you do. Now, with that being said, Vince may be the king of not taking accountability for what.
Oh my God!
Oh,
Yeah, no.
As we found in this documentary,
What am he done?
Vince 100% does not take accountability. So I'm not defending Vince. Please don't see it as that. But I'm saying everyone needs to take personal accountability in their own lives.
Yep.
Right.
That's fact.
I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. You know, we've had this discussion hundreds of times when it comes to shit like this. So I'm not gonna like deny any of your comments or thoughts because what you're saying is the gospel. It's true. It happens in professional wrestling all the time. It happens in fucking general life.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
NFL, NBA,
Yeah,
MLB,
in
it
any
happens
sport.
everywhere.
Any sport. You know? So Hater said, instead of bouncing between episodes, I want to hear you guys go in order. Episode 1, Vince's childhood and upbringing. What are your thoughts?
They didn't touch on. They really did not touch on Vince's childhood and upbringing. They spent so little time on and knowing about Vince's backstory by reading his Playboy interview, his Howard Stern interview, stuff like that. There is so much meat on the bone that they left out of this documentary on just his childhood alone, the sexual abuse, his relationship with his mother. Like there is so much that if Netflix would have just made the first episode completely about Vince's childhood, you would kind of understand why Vince was the way he was business wise. The other shit outside of business, not talking about the lawsuits and his sexual stuff and all that, but business wise, why Vince was the way, why he was so ruthless, why he was kind of cold towards his family, like why didn't really have a great relationship with his children. Like if they would have covered his childhood, you would understand that more.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot about Vince's childhood. I've watched interviews, I've watched podcasts, I've read books about it. Vince is like motherfucking Bruce Wayne and Batman, bro. Vince had a fucked up childhood.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Hurt people
Hurt people.
hurt people.
They do.
Vince very much is Vince never got love as a child, which explains why he didn't know how to show love to his children. Thank God for Linda, because I think she was kind of the stabilizer, and that's why kind of Shane turned out. I mean, honestly, out of all the McMahon, Shane
is the
came off as
normalized
best.
one.
He
Yeah.
came off the best in this documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think Shane, honestly, like the sight with Shane and his kids coming out of WrestleMania.
That was hard. That was
Bro,
wholesome. I
that
like
was yeah.
And that's the big difference. Like, Shane basically took everything his dad did and learned to do the opposite.
Yep.
Like, you could tell Shane loved his kids. He spends time with his kids. He's,
he's
very
given
involved in his
his
kids'
love
life.
more than he got love from his dad.
Even
Oh, yeah.
Stephanie. Stephanie's the same way. Like Stephanie loves her kids.
I mean, I'm not saying she don't, but I feel like Stephanie is much more like her dad than people think.
Stephanie is much more like Vince because she feels that as a woman, she has to show that power. She has to show that dominance because of the way she was raised. I don't blame her for being the way she is.
No.
Once again, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean,
Yeah.
I just feel like at the end of the day, Stephanie is very business minded. I mean, you saw when Vince stepped down the first time, Stephanie was real quick to come swoop in and take his
I'm
position.
gonna
at
take
the
that.
board. So I did. She's very much. I feel she's very much Vince's daughter.
This
Pretty
wasn't
much.
something that I was gonna like hard hone in on about the documentary, but there's a portion of this documentary towards the end where, like, I think it was actually the last episode, kind of like, yeah, it was the last episode because they're talking about when he had to retire, and I know we're not going in order, but I mean, we're not going to go in order. When he had to retire because of the allegations. Well, not even that. The first time that the allegations
Right.
came out, and he was on that SmackDown, and he
Yeah.
just came out and didn't get
Yeah, and
shit
everyone's
about
here for
anybody.
him.
And there's like a portion of the documentary in that last episode that was really like making wrestling fans feel shitty, which I don't. Again, I was not somebody that celebrated him coming out that day
I
on
did.
SmackDown. I was not somebody who was gonna chant "Thank you, Vince."
Nope.
Like Stephanie tried and succeeded in getting everybody to chant. And I was thinking about what Phil Mushnick really throughout the course of the documentary was reiterating, and it's that at the end of the day, if the fans are being entertained, they really don't care what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
I think we discussed
Um,
that too when Vince came out on that SmackDown episode, and we were all just like, "Why the fuck are they even chanting Vince when they hate the guy?" Like what
Here's
Drew
the
said.
thing. Well, here's the thing. People hated the character, but wrestling fans, people get on Twitter and they think that's the majority of wrestling fans because that the voice that carries on there is those internet wrestling fans. But that is such a small minority of actual wrestling fans. If Vince came out on Raw Monday night, the roof would come off the building. And that's just the reality of it.
So I'm going to tell you guys, like, I'm going to sum it up for you guys like this. I respect Vince McMahon as a business person for what he's done for professional wrestling. In a sense, but I don't respect him for being the person he is.
But-
I respect him for what he's done for the business. Now, do I respect the character Mr. McMahon? Because you have to understand, like, you got to separate the man from the gimmick.
But is there a separation when it
Yeah,
I was-
people
I was
said in
go-
the
I was-
documentary there
I
was
was
no
getting
separation.
there. I was getting there. You got to separate the man from the gimmick. But sometimes people live the gimmick. Like people
Yeah.
100% live the gimmick. You got people that are Italian that do a Russian gimmick. You got people who are who do like Nazi gimmicks, who are married to black women and men. And you got people like Vince who sometimes believes the hype, like Hogan.
Here's
Hogan
the
believes
thing:
the hype.
is Vince living the gimmick, or is Vince the gimmick? So, like,
That's a good question.
Because I mean, comparing to someone that goes out and plays a Russian or plays a Nazi or whatever, totally different than what Vince is doing. Because Vince really isn't going out and playing a character. He's going out and saying, "Hey, I'm the boss," which he is. I'm the owner, which he is.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he's going out and playing, a Canadian or whatever. So I don't feel like there is a gimmick involved. I feel like very much it is Vince being Vince when he's out on TV. Yeah, he turns it up a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's Vince. But
Yeah.
I do want to say this, and I hate hearing people say, "Oh, Vince did so much for wrestling," and Vince
did he though?
But everyone acts like, and Vince was the main one pushing the narrative that, before him, wrestling was in small little bars and, these, fairs and stuff like that. But before Vince, you had Texas selling out stadiums. You had Crockett selling out stadiums. You had Vince Sr. selling out Shea Stadium, selling out Madison Square Garden on a monthly basis.
The difference is, while they were selling out these buildings in local areas, they weren't global. They weren't on TV.
They weren't global and they weren't mainstream back in the time.
What do you mean? The Von Erichs, they were all the way in Australia on TV. But here's the thing. You also got to look at that time. TV wasn't like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have the options of cable
or streaming services.
Vince, like closed circuit TV. Vince didn't invent closed circuit TV, ladies and gentlemen.
But you know what? And Vince failed at closed circuit TV much more than he succeeded at it.
Mm-hmm.
Vince promoted a lot of stuff outside of wrestling on closed circuit TV, where he lost a shitload of money. Muhammad Ali and Antonio Inoki lost a shitload of money by presenting that on closed circuit. Evil Knievel's jump over the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, I remember that.
The Snake Canyon, because that was the whole thing. Lost a lot of money on that. Like, Vince was not as successful in all these areas that he claims to be. He was in the wrestling atmosphere with WrestleMania 1, but that was really his only venture into closed circuit with wrestling. He had one success on closed circuit, and that was one time with WrestleMania. But if Crockett would have had, Crockett would have came around right when TV hit that big boom in that mid 80s, would it have been different?
Probably.
I mean, Vince is very much a circumstance of the environment of the time. Yes, he did more things than other promoters did, but that's mainly because those things weren't around when these other promoters were running.
Right. The thing about Vince is that what you can, I hate saying the word, but what you can really admire about him is his almost obsession with taking risks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like he takes a lot of what this documentary showed is that he is willing to do what nobody has done before. And really like hone in on a certain aspect of something and go along with what the audience wanted, at least, back then. Yeah. They didn't really, what I found interesting, quick side note, I found interesting that, they were really like focusing on, Vince is listening to the audience back like the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression times. But they didn't talk anything about the PG era and how Vince literally didn't give a shit about what the audience wanted.
Well, and here's the thing, and I hate how glorified the Attitude Era is, because outside of the main event scene in the Attitude Era, it was garbage.
Oh yeah, no.
For every Stone Cold, you had 5 Mae Youngs giving birth to a hand. Like the Attitude Era was 90% garbage with 10%, good TV. It just happened that good TV was really good. That 10% was so good that it made up for the 90%
The
that
thing,
was
you know
garbage.
what though? I think this was something that really like hit me with the documentary. They what they were doing, I don't know if it wasn't successful because of the business itself. It was successful really because Vince was looking at what the crowd wanted and was playing off of that every week. It's like, like you said earlier, he really was more living the gimmick than anything because
Right.
when he, and I mean, I'm sure everybody has been a victim of this type of mentality, the herd mentality.
Oh yeah.
When you're in a room full of people and they're all vibing off the same idea and you're just like, yeah, that's really good, and then we can do this and then we can do that, and like a lot of what, especially when they were talking about the women of the
Oh,
Attitude Era into the ruthless aggression era, what the puppies and
I really didn't
the
like that, honestly.
and Trish barking like a dog, like all of that stuff. Obviously, in 2024, here and now, would never happen.
Yeah, that was sexism at its worst.
Yeah, it
But
was.
in the early to mid and even late-ish 2000s, for like really 2000 to 2010,
Diva wrestling.
they audiences were more primarily men in the 18 to 34 demographic and were wanting to see the women that way. So as a result, Vince was booking the women that way because that's what was getting the views. That's what people were tuning in for. So I can't like, as much as it's definitely because Vince was living the gimmick. I mean, they were showing some of the Trish stuff and all this. It's like, yeah, you don't have to book yourself making out with Trish in front of your wife in a
You don't
wheelchair,
have to do it.
but you're doing it because one, it's kind of exciting and you're getting a rush from it, and two, you're playing to what your audience wants. I didn't realize. And I don't know if maybe it was a documentary portraying it this way, or if it really was this way. You guys can tell me if since you were watching back then. But like the Trish barking like a dog segment, the fans were rabid for that shit. They weren't booing at all. They wanted her to get on her hands and knees and bark.
And
So
you know what? I mean, if they did the same thing today, you'd probably get the same reception.
oh, I don't think so.
Yeah, not
But here's the
today.
thing. No, here's the thing, and that's what I keep saying is you got to think wrestling is very much a business that caters to that men, the conservatives, like it's very like if you look from the beginning of wrestling where it came from, and that's why it's so big in the South. Like it's just that whole, and I feel like Twitter is gonna go berserk about it. Twitter is gonna hate it. Your internet fans are gonna hate it, but I feel like a majority of those regular wrestling fan,
There's always going to be a segment of something that will
and
root for stuff like that.
I feel like
I agree with you.
I feel like
But
that segment's a lot bigger than people think it is.
It's
I mean, look, Kid Rock still gets cheered when he shows up in WWE.
well, Hogan does too. I mean,
Exactly.
No, I mean Hogan gets a lot of boos more than ever now.
But what I'm saying is, I mean, there's a reason why Donald Trump is almost maybe going to win the presidency again at the end of the year.
Oh, don't
So-
fucking say that. But then again, I get where you're going with that.
If there is a section of people in any fandom of anything that are going to want the thing that would be highly anticipated and wanted in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, because They just don't want to change with the times, which also was a lot of what the documentary was about too, especially the beginning 2 episodes when he's taking over from his father. His father was set in his ways. Vince wanted to change the business. He was the one that wanted to interview. He wanted to infiltrate those territories and make it global. And I really don't think, I'll honestly tell you, I really don't think wrestling would be what it is today if he didn't do that.
And that's why I said the shit that he did, the positive shit that he did. I mean, it wasn't all positive because he fucking ruined wrestling, but he also made. I can't believe I'm about to say this shit. He made wrestling great again.
Oh God.
Well, here's the thing. Like, so it's easy to say.
Well, you know what? You don't have to say. There's a different G word that you can replace great with, and it's global. Make wrestling global because.
Well, here's the thing. Like, and I think, and this is what I hate when people say that. I feel like even without Vince taking over, wrestling still would have ended up going the way it did, because someone else would. I mean, like I said, WCCW had that national exposure. They were on TV all the way in Australia.
Well, you know why they were on TV in Australia? Because WCCW was an NWA affiliate.
No, this was after they left the NWA. They were the thing that hurt WCW was the Von Erich scandal. But like, just all the brothers dying and all that stuff just kind of soured people, because they're like, how much tragedy can we take from one company? Gina Hernandez, the Von Erich brothers, all that shit. But like, even like the NWA, our Jim Crockett promotion, was on national TV with TBS, TBS, Turner Broadcasting at the time. Like, there was other companies with that national spotlight. I don't think Vince not taking over would have stopped that from it may not have happened as fast. I don't think it would have stopped it from happening, though.
I don't think it would be as global as it is today.
Well, let's also talk about a couple of things that came out in the interview. You had guys like John Cena, guys like The Undertaker, guys like Stone Cold, The Rock, Cody Rhodes, a whole bunch of other people who were willing to like be like, yo, Vince was a genius promoter, and he was a father figure to some of these guys.
Oh, Undertaker said he'd take a bullet for him.
Yeah, Taker was like, yo, I dropped dead for this guy. Like,
and the gimmick of a dead man.
I see why Taker would say something like that. People don't realize that Taker was in WWE before he was in WWE as Undertaker. Taker was in WCW. It was Mark Callis.
Mark Calloway.
He was in WWE. He was Mark Callis. He was also in WCW. He was in WCCW as the Punisher. So he had been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But Vince took that 6'8" redhead and made him a fucking star. Like, he was okay in WCW, he was okay in World Class, he was okay in the USWA, but Vince made him a star. Just like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Steve Austin was great in Texas. He was great in WCW, but he didn't become Stone Cold until he was in WWE. He didn't become a fucking he didn't become a household name until he was in WWE. Same thing with The Rock. The Rock was in USWA, Flex Cavana, and all this other fucking bullshit, but he didn't become The Rock until he was in WWE.
But here's the thing, and this is once again where I think Vince gets more credit than he deserves. I give him credit for letting these guys go out there and kind of be themselves more. But The Rock is not a character created by Vince McMahon.
No.
It's Vince McMahon allowing Dwayne Johnson to go out there and turn his personality up to 10. Stone Cold is not a creation of Vince McMahon. Wanted him to be Chili McFreeze.
Chili McFreeze. That's right.
Like, Stone Cold is not a creation of Vince McMahon. Stone Cold is just went out there when he won King of the Ring.
That's the bottom line.
Got a chance to cut a promo. That promo got over like a motherfucker.
I guess what I'm trying to say.
But Stone Cold started in ECW.
I guess what I'm trying to say, he was still stunning Steve in ECW though, but I guess what I'm trying to say is the marketing juggernaut that Vince McMahon has created. Because Vince took wrestling from being a sport to being almost like a goddamn movie. I mean, Saturday morning cartoons, ice cream bars, the marketing behind everything in WWE. That is what I'm talking about. Because we talk about it right now. You say it yourself. You can go to a Monday Night Raw, you can go to a fucking SmackDown, you can go to WWE pay-per-view, and they have fucking t-shirts, fucking everything galore. They're selling they're selling fucking seats at the events. AEW doesn't do that. AEW has for our t-shirt company, as the IWC likes to call them, t-shirt company. Their merchandise fucking is horrible compared to the WWE, whose merchandise is like outrageous.
But here's the thing, and once again, you're comparing a company that's been around 50 years under Vince to a company that's just now hitting their 5-year strand. When Vince took over WWF, when they hit that 5-year strand, how many t-shirts, WWF t-shirts, were there out there? Very few. Only the tippy top guys had a t-shirt. So it's not fair to make a comparison and saying, hey, look, this company that's been around 50 years is doing all this merchandising.
And don't get
this company that's around
don't
5
wrong.
years.
I'm not bashing AEW for that.
I'm not saying you're bashing them, but I'm saying people like to make that comparison. Yeah. But and it's like the same people that compare the ratings from Raw to Dynamite.
I don't give a shit about that.
Raw's been around. Well, but I'm saying, like, there's people I want to compare those ratings.
Raw's like Monday Night Football. It's ingrained in you.
Right. Raw's been around 30 some years now. AEW is just now hitting 5 years. Like,
okay, so
look at Raw's ratings. Let me
reiterate what I was trying to the point I was trying to get to. Vince McMahon made a global juggernaut. He made a marketing, like the marketing is so outrageous because of the shit that he's done by taking these risks. That's what I'm saying. Their marketing, fuck the wrestling. AEW has amazing wrestling.
Yeah.
WWE has wrestling. Vince took the wrestling out of the WWE. Oh, like literally. He made it like a fucking movie. He made everyone like superheroes. He made everyone comic book characters. And I used to tell people when I first started wrestling, I want to work for the NWA. They said, why? Because I don't want to be a comic book character. I want to be a wrestler. And that's what I'm saying. Vince made wrestling he made wrestling no longer a sport, but he made it entertainment. And that's the point I'm trying to get at.
He made wrestling a viable career where you can get rich. So here's the thing. Before Vince, you had a bunch of people in wrestling making a lot of money. After Vince got there, you had the top guys making a lot of money and everyone else making decent money. Like, then that's one of the things, like, Vince gets all this credit, but a lot less people are making money in wrestling with Vince after Vince took over than before Vince took over. Before Vince took over, you could be a job guy and that's your career. Like, you're making enough money to live very well as just a job guy. You don't have that anymore. So to Hater's point, episode 2, let's cover these topics.
I kind of want to say this. I feel bad for Andre the Giant. I feel bad because I feel like he would have lived a little bit longer if Vince didn't make him being brought back.
He wouldn't have. He lived longer than he was expected to, or that he was.
Yeah, well, I mean, if he did something like the wrestling wise, is what I'm trying to say.
Because even then, like, even after Andre came back, from the time Vince got him to come back to the time he died, he maybe took one bump, and that's when Hogan body slammed him. It's not like Andre was going out there having these physical matches.
Right.
Yeah. Andre was going out, throwing people around, pinning them. That's it. Like Andre wasn't going out and hitting Canadian destroyers and
that would have been interesting.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
So, I don't think Andre would have lived any longer had he not come back to wrestling. He was on borrowed time. He wasn't supposed to make it past 35. So, the Sergeant Slaughter here. I mean, we didn't really learn anything new about the Slaughter here.
I didn't even know about the whole Sergeant Slaughter thing on this. That was kind of good to me.
It was actually originally supposed to be Tugboat. He was supposed to be Sheik Tugboat.
Oh God!
But then they got
Sergeant Slaughter was better because of the whole G.I. Joe thing.
Yeah.
But you know
what the Sergeant Slaughter part of the documentary documented, which they pretty much, I think there was at least one or two times every episode that documented just how good Vince was able to kind of switch it up in the last second if needed.
God damn it!
He was supposed to, they did the whole war thing, and he still did the match, but he realized that was the wrong thing to do after the fact because nobody was really wanting it. So, and then the other part too, the
emo rap.
Vince's. So Andre was like, all right.
Just about before you go into that, the Sergeant Slaughter thing, right quick. It really showed kind of, I guess even that showed kind of the human side. I don't think they really talked about it, but the reason Vince came up with that storyline was because Sergeant Slaughter was very down on his luck at the time, was basically broken, about to lose his house, and Vince came back and gave him, he could basically save his house and make a living.
They didn't even talk about that in the documentary.
No, yeah, they totally didn't. They skipped right over that. But and that's just some of the things, like Vince did a lot of shitty things. Vince also did a lot of great things for people in the business outside of what he, obviously had to. There's a reason why people like the people in the documentary. Plus, even guys like Bryan Danielson, still, talk highly of Vince McMahon the person, because to certain people, he was a father figure. He was a mentor. He was, a kind. There are the worst person in the world. There's a person that you could find that knew that person and was like, they weren't that bad.
He really helped me out in this situation, and it's really hard for me to now just be like, oh, that person is the worst person
ever. That's really understandable.
But you know what? And at the, when Harley Race was dying, Vince took care of all his medical bills. And Vince never made a big thing about it. It wasn't something like WWE touted on their website or, Vince did a lot of stuff for people that people don't know about. So, and even when people defend him, like when Cena defends him in the interview, or, Foley, that clip came out of Foley kind of defending him. It makes me cringe. But then I also remember, this guy did a lot for these people. He saved a lot of these people's lives and gave them, let them take care of their family.
And not to put Vince over or anything like that, but the dude did create the wellness policy for people, even who weren't.
He kind of had
after the fact.
Yeah, he kind of had to do that.
He didn't have to do shit.
He had to, though.
He didn't have to do shit.
He didn't have to, but he had to.
Yeah.
In order for his business to run successfully post Chris Benoit, he had to create the wellness policy.
Here's the thing: the government was breathing down his neck, so it's not Vince did it to be a good person. He did it to get the government away from him.
Yeah.
So the Mel Phillips thing. This was kind of the hardest part of the documentary for me. Just because Terry Garvin and Mel Phillips barely mentioned. Pat Patterson 100% attacked.
Oh yeah.
Now, I was friends with Pat. I love Pat. Pat was a mentor. Pat was a hero. Obviously, I'm very biased when it comes towards Pat. But so here's the thing: Mel Phillips, Terry Garvin, both were accused of touching the Ring Boys, touching underage kids. Pat Patterson was not accused of touching any children. Pat Patterson was accused of using his position in the company to get sexual favors from the adult men on the roster, allegedly. But I mean, at the same time, Pat's partner was on the road with him at this time. I don't know. I mean, is it completely impossible?
I'm going to be honest with you. Obviously, I did not know Pat Patterson at all, so I have no personal history or relationship with him. But I will say, I think it was unfair to lump him in with the other two. Because
absolutely.
Yeah,
it
I think it's
was
because he was gay and everything. That's
Well,
why it didn't.
yeah, like if he wasn't doing it like and yeah, the documentary never says that the two previous mentioned names plus Pat Patterson were in the Ring Boy scandal. It was the two not Pat Patterson in the Ring Boy scandal,
Yeah,
and then Pat Patterson was doing other things.
yeah.
But they
I
lumped
think-
it in a weird way.
So I'm not going to defend Pat Patterson. I met him a couple of times at CAC. Dude was a real nice guy. Never had anything evil to say.
I wish I could have met Pat.
You know, he was always like a really upbeat guy. You know what I'm saying? Like every time I saw him, and he remembered your fucking name, which is cool.
I like when people remember my name.
Yeah, I mean, I would see him like twice a year, and he remembered my name. It's fucking crazy. But the point I'm making about Pat Patterson is, yeah, Pat Patterson did some shit. He did some shit. So what?
But here's the thing:
He did it with adults.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. That's the thing that bothers me. Like,
Well, but I mean, you still like if people don't want to be touched, obviously, you're still.
but this was people that that didn't have a problem with, is what I'm saying.
here's the thing. But
Well, according
here's
to,
the
I
thing.
mean, Tony Atlas, if you touch Tony Atlas, he didn't want it.
Oh yeah,
his
Tony will
factor.
touch him if you look.
here-
Show him your feet, but
Here's the thing, and I'll talk about Tony in a second. Because I Tony's as carny as they come. I wouldn't believe a thing like. I don't want to sound like I'm just like defending my friend here.
you just want to be like, no Diddy.
I don't want to sound like that, but at the same time, I do feel like that. Just because I've been around the man, like here's the thing with Pat Patterson. Notice the guys that okay, even if in WWF you got fired because you wouldn't sleep with Pat Patterson, if you really had that much value to your name, if you're really that great of a talent, why didn't you go to any other company that Pat Patterson was not at and become a star?
Facts.
Yeah.
Barry Orton, who accused Pat of, whatever, said, "Oh, I didn't get ahead because I didn't sleep with him. I got fired."
Wait. This is for Julian. Hey, did you guys know that Barry Orton was Randy Orton's uncle?
I did not know that. What? When did that happen?
Julian,
I didn't.
Julian didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
But and that's my thing. Like, if you would have been a star, if you would have slept with Pat Patterson, why didn't you go to WCW or Jim Crockett Promotion and become a star?
Yeah.
Jim Powers said, "Oh, I didn't get I got fired from WWF because I would have been a star. They're really going to push me. I had all this, that, and the other, but I wouldn't sleep with Pat." Then why did you become a job guy in WCW?
Exactly. Pat wasn't there.
Pat was not there. Why? All these guys, you never hear guys that actually made it in the business, even guys that didn't make it in WWF and went to WCW and became a big deal. You never hear them saying, "Well, I got let go from WWF because I wouldn't sleep with Pat." It's always the guys that couldn't make it, know where they go, that are making these accusations against Pat.
And it also when being gay was very not so, they didn't like the gays back then.
And here's very much. It was very much.
Yeah.
you were gay, you're automatically lumped into
Like witch,
a whole
you're a
bunch of other
witch.
shit.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and I think Lanny Poffo said this the best. In a shoot interview when he was asked about it, he said, "What benefit would it have to Vince McMahon to push someone because they're fucking Pat Patterson?"
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Vince makes what benefit does it have to Vince McMahon to make you a star because you're fucking his,
Nothing.
someone in the company?
Nothing at all. There's no fucking benefit whatsoever to it.
That's like me saying, "Oh, you're fucking my neighbor. Here, let me give you $250,000 a year."
Well,
it
shit.
makes no sense. You're doing that does nothing for me. If you're not going to make me money, I'm not going to pay you money.
Yeah.
That's like people say, "Oh, Brooklyn Brawler was fucking Pat Patterson. That's why he had a job for 20." Vince isn't going to keep you around if you're not doing a good job. And Brooklyn Brawler was an amazing producer.
Well, not for nothing, and I don't mean to disparage Pat by saying this, but the other side of that is Vince McMahon held Pat Patterson to a very high regard. And
Gerald Briscoe too.
Yeah.
And I again, I don't know. I'm not saying that this is a fact. I'm just saying that it could potentially have been possible that people who claimed these things, Vince is the one that can do all that stuff, but Pat Patterson was head booker. He could have had influence on Vince more than the people that were accusing Pat. So, like, when you say, hey, this guy couldn't be, he said he blamed Pat Patterson for not being a star. Why didn't he go to another company? Well, is it because of Vince that they weren't a star, or was it because of Pat telling Vince not to make them a star?
But that's my thing. Okay, so if you really are going to be a star in wrestling, you're going to be a star in wrestling. Look at Swerve Strickland today. WWE did nothing with him. He went to AEW.
Yep.
The cream rises to the top.
Yeah, okay. I see your point, though.
Yeah.
And especially, you got to think, during that time of the scandal, WCW was neck and neck with WWF. You could have went to WCW and became a star if you really had what it takes to be a star.
To be a rat.
You're not wrong.
Ted Turner wasn't trying to fuck anyone.
Jane Fonda would have something to say about that, but
exactly.
But so I want to close it on this. The documentary was pretty bland in a sense because there wasn't nothing new.
Because you already knew stuff.
The thing. So I said this earlier in our chat this afternoon. The one thing that made this different versus any other documentary that has come out about Vince or about WWE is that we were now hearing about Vince from Vince himself.
Oh yeah.
It was really. This was the first time Vince McMahon was sitting in a chair being interviewed about Vince McMahon.
And that's the point I made earlier. I don't know if it was before we started or when we were just bullshitting before the show, when Shane said, hopefully there's a part 2. You really can't do a part 2 without Vince, because if you do a part 2, you're just every other documentary that's come out about Vince where he's not involved.
So, in closing this, I'm just going to say this.
And we're not going to go through all the episodes because the hater left another one.
We can do the rest of the episodes during the week.
Okay.
So I do want to touch on the Rita, the referee thing, right?
Yeah, because I feel bad on her.
Just so we can close out episode 2. So when we come back, we jump right into episode 3.
Okay.
Yeah, Vince raped her.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah. Is there really? Does anyone believe that he?
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah, good night. Bye, guys.
Does anyone believe that he didn't?
No, I don't believe.
There are insane people saying that he didn't do it.
You know,
I mean, and this wasn't a case. People are, why'd she wait so long to come out? No, she came out and said, "Yo, this man raped me right."
I'm
when
sure supporters are saying that.
Vince, and here's the crazy thing: Vince doesn't deny sleeping with her; he denies raping her.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
there's so many things that we can
really
unpack.
Sleazy, gross thing about him saying, "Oh, if it was that, the statute of limitations."
Oh God, yeah, that was like, okay. You raped her.
That right there was your admission. That was your admission right there.
Yeah, basically, you're like, yeah.
Why did he have to pay hush money to her if he didn't rape her?
That's like someone that says, "Oh, I killed that guy like 10 years ago, but statute of limitations. Oh, that guy got killed 2 years ago, but his statute of limitations is over. So yeah, I did it. Guess what? You still did it."
Well, just to correct what Shane said, he didn't pay her hush money. So in 2021, New York lifted the statute of limitations on rape for lawsuits. So she was able to file a lawsuit against Vince then, and she won, or I think he settled out of court with her. But he did not give her hush money. She ended up having to take him to court 20 years later, and he settled. And you're not going to settle if I'm sorry.
So I'm gonna double up on what you just said. So I don't usually get all political on the show because I don't think that that's a place and time, but there's a place and time for it. But there's a place and time for this right now. Okay. Donald Trump got convicted of 34 felonies.
No, he's innocent. How dare you?
Hold on, Shane. Let me get it out. 34 felonies, right? He got convicted. That means a court of law said there was enough evidence to prove that he did it. My thing is this. If I'm going to say I didn't do something, but I'm going to pay you money and a settlement, for me, if I didn't do something, I'm going to fucking fight till the wheels fall off. Like you're not going to make me pay one fucking dime. So with the Vince McMahon thing, by him settling out of court, or like, to me, that screams guilt. Because Vince has all the money in the fucking world. He could have fought that shit forever. Literally, Vince could have fought it so long to where she didn't have any money to keep paying lawyers and she'd have to give the case up. So by him not doing that, I'm sorry, but that's kind of like an admission of guilt.
So here's what I'm going to say to that. In the Vince situation, I 100% believe he did it. But I never see rich people settling in court. I never take that as an automatic they're guilty or something. A lot of times they consider even like real lawsuits, they consider them nuisance lawsuits, to where they say it's just not worth the time. It's not going to really be any skin off our back to just pay. I don't think this isn't what this situation was. But in general, I don't think settling in court automatically means guilt. So, because even Paul Heyman says like he would sue WCW every few months over something stupid because he knew if it was under a certain amount of money that Turner would just settle out of court for it instead of having to actually go through the lawsuit.
I don't know, man. If someone accused me of something and they got out and I'm going to court, guess what? They got to find me fucking guilty.
We're not going
to settle.
We're not billionaires or millionaires who can afford to throw money at it.
And that's what I'm saying. If you're a billionaire and you're a millionaire and you got money to throw at it, then if you don't want to look guilty, fight that shit till the wheels fall off.
Well, I'm trying, and in Vince's case, I 100% believe Vince is guilty, but I'm just saying I don't want to label it automatically that
I get what you're
people
saying.
that settle lawsuits are automatically guilty, because sometimes it's just like, I don't want to deal with the headache of this.
I get what you're saying.
Let me just give him money to go away.
It's like the dude who, it's like Nikki Bella's husband. Like the whole situation, like they found like the case was dropped. The Napa County sheriffs did not. The DA refused to file charges against him. Like there's my mom used to always say this when I was younger. There's your truth, there's their truth, there's the truth.
Wait, they actually dropped the charges?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, the charges got dropped.
Shit, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it just came out yesterday.
Came out yesterday. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yep, all the charges are dropped. He had like 7 charges against him. They all got dropped.
Damn.
Now I'm not saying he's innocent by any chance, but that just proves that there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Now in Vince's case, Vince flat out admitted he did it. Like, I don't know. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back again probably
episode 4
Monday, on Monday with another portion, maybe episode 3 of the Vince McMahon documentary. For Sunday Center, for Shane Husky, for the Drew Nicholas, not Nichols, but Drew Nicholas. I'm the franchise, and we'll see you guys on Monday with even more of the Roundtable Pro Wrestling Podcast. Have a good night.